If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell icon to get the latest updates.
So today we are going to discuss the data model. So just a quick recap what we discussed in the previous sessions. So we discussed about the overview, the purpose of MDG, and how we can actually activate MDG component on any SAP system. And we also discussed about hub versus co-deployment scenarios. Depends on in which system you are activating your MDG component. And we also saw that pros and cons of each of these approaches. And finally, we discussed about that the MDG architecture overview. So this is the MDG architecture. You can see this in the MDG architecture. So this particular portion is available. This is your domain-specific staging area data models that get created in MDG, which you will be using to store temporarily your master data while this particular the master data is in the process of getting its approvals or while it is in the process of the governance process. Okay, so we will discuss about the each of these functionalities as part of this particular course. And after that, these are the out of box the master data that is available in MDG, like your material masters, business partner, customer, and vendors. You also have finance objects, and as a solution extensions, EAM, whereas enterprise asset management under an EAM solutions, you get these equipment masters, functional locations, bombs, task list, object link, object network. So there are a couple of objects are there under EAM solution, which will be mainly used in plant maintenance module of SAP. And in IS retail space, article master is also available as an out of box where you can use this MDG solution. Okay, so these are the out of box solutions that are available. Now, other than this, if we are looking for any master data that needs to be governed in via MDG, then it will be a kind of a custom master. Like custom master in the sense you need to develop that particular the master data, the all the MDG features we need to develop for that particular master data. But the MDG framework supports creation of your own master data custom under custom object model framework. Okay, so so today we are going to discuss data model concepts. So basically this data model deals with your staging area. Okay, how we can generate the staging area or how we can actually extend the existing staging areas. So those things we'll be discussing as part of this particular data model topic. Okay, so before getting into the data model topic, there is a small concept called flex versus reuse mode. Okay, so under data model, the first topic that we are going to discuss is reuse versus flex mode. Okay, so what is reuse and flex mode? So let's discuss about reuse mode first. Okay, so this is your SAP system. Okay, like your ERP component. On top of that one, we are activating the MDG functionality, so that you will get all the MDG features also available in the same system. Now, as part of this MDG, when you are activating this MDG business functions, for every master data, system will create or this staging area will get generated. Okay, staging area is nothing but the tables. Okay, and you also have something called active area, which by default you get as part of your ERP solution. Like it's a group of tables. When you take material master, MARA, MARC, MVK, MBEW, MAKT. So all these are the tables. If you're taking vendor master, LFA1, LFB1, those are the standard SAP tables are already available over here. So what happens is, in general in MDG, so user will log into MDG, he'll open the MDG UI application, he'll enter all the material master or any master data specific data, he'll submit the request. So once he submits the request, that data gets stored into your staging area in MDG. And on the staging record, people, the approvers will review that data and they will correct that data. They further enrich that data. The review and governance process will happen on top of your the record that submitted by the requester. Okay, and finally, if the final approver approves this particular request, okay, this is good to go. This particular record, I wanted to set up this record in my SAP system. In that is the time where that record will be. We call that as an activation process. In MDG, activation process means that is the final step where the data will be moved from your staging area to your active area. Okay, so this process, this activation process, as part of the activation process, the moving that record or the deleting the record from your staging area will get deleted, and the same record will be pushed down to your underlying Mara Marsi, that your active area table. So we call this as an active area. Okay, so this process happens automatically. Okay, so the your temporary record or staging record will get deleted, and your changes will be moved to your the respective active area tables. If it is in case of business partner or vendor or customer, so the data will be moved to the underlying BP or customer vendor tables. Okay, so this process, wherever once this activation process gets initiated, if the data automatically moves from your staging area to your active area, I am talking about the same MDG system. It's the same one single system only, but the data will be moved from staging tables to your active area tables. Active area tables are nothing but your standard SAP ERP tables only. Okay, so this process we call it as a reuse mode. That means this active area, your Mara Marsi tables, you are reusing to store the active records. Active records means those records can be used for your transactional activities. So after that, as you have your target systems anyway, okay, so your target systems, so the data will be once this activation process is completed and the data is available in your active area, then from this particular active area, from this particular tables, your data will be replicated to the respective target systems. So this process we call it as a reuse process or reuse mode. Any questions? Is this clear?
Means it is available only in the coexisting systems, right?
No, it's not necessarily. So this is a hub scenario. The diagram I shown is an hub scenario. In the hub scenario, this is your MDG system, brand new MDG system. These are your target systems.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah. So even if it is a co-deployment also, so you will have your MDG in this particular system, MDG layer. So what happens, the data will be moved from here to the underlying one, and from there you can replicate the data to the respective target systems. So it doesn't nothing to do with your hub or co-deployment. In any case, the data will be here. The point that we need to understand is, in case of reuse mode, the data will be at the time of activation process. The data from your staging will be moved to your underlying active area tables, nothing but your ERP tables. Clear?
Yes, actually. Once the CR get activated, the data deleted from the staging tables and moved to the ERB tables, right?
Exactly. Okay.
Good.
Now this we call it as a reuse mode. Okay. Now coming back to the flex mode. Flex mode. Okay. In case of flex mode, the same thing. You have your MDG system. This is your ERP system, and this is the MDG component. You have your staging area. You have your active area, and the target systems are also there here. Okay. Now, same user will log into MDG. He will initiate the master data creation or change process. The data gets updated into your staging area. Now, after activation, okay, the record will be get activated, and the active record will get stored into your staging area only. That means your inactive record will become active, and that active record will be stored in your staging table only. It doesn't move to your underlying ECC. It doesn't move that record to underlying ECC. Okay, so this is the concept of flex mode. So your same staging area is flexible enough to store your inactive record, and post activation the same staging table will store your active record. That means your inactive record will turn into active record. There won't be two copies of records. As soon as our activation process gets initiated, your inactive record will be turned to active record. Now the point comes where this active record will get stored. If the active record gets stored in my active area, then we call it as a reuse. If the active record gets stored in the same staging table, then this will be called as a flex mode. So from this particular flex table, from the staging area only, your replication, the data will be replicated to the target systems. See, always your active record will be replicated to the target systems. You cannot replicate your staging record. Now, where my active record lies, whether it is in my active area or it is in my staging area, it depends on that one. The data will be picked up from that particular staging or active area, and the data will be replicated to the target systems. Okay, so this is flex mode. Now, if you look at your flex mode, your active record is not available over here in your active area, underlying active area table. So you need to configure an additional replication to move the data to your active area as well. Whereas in case of reuse mode, this process happens automatically. So no need to configure any additional replication. All you need to do is you need to configure your replication to these three target systems. Whereas in case of flex mode, along with these three target systems, you also need to additionally configure that replication to the same system, but it's to the ERP tables. This is flex mode. So if you understood these concepts, then we can discuss why SAP has given these two approaches, and which objects follow which approach and those things. So any questions on these two, flex versus reuse? Okay, if no questions, now we have how many different out-of-box masters? Material master, business partner, then finance objects, then we also have article master and EAM objects. These are the out-of-box objects. So when you are creating your data model or when you are defining your master data in MDG, we need to fix to that whether this particular master data should follow flex or reuse mode. Okay, so what happens is your BP, article master and EAM. So all these objects are developed using reuse mode approach. These are already developed using reuse mode approach. That means when you are creating a material, so initially the material data gets loaded into your staging area, and after that, once the final approver approves and initiates the activation process, if the activation is successful, then the staging record will be moved to your Mara Marcy tables. Similarly, if you are trying to create a BP or customer, vendor, article or equipment functional location, in all these scenarios, at the time of activation, your data will be pushed down to your underlying ECC tables. So these objects, these material master, BP, article master and EM objects are defined or developed using reuse mode concept. So you cannot change this reuse to flex mode later. So it has to follow the same approach all the time. Whereas only your finance object developed using flex mode. Okay, so finance object only developed using flex mode. Now assume that you wanted to, when you are creating your custom object in the sense, let's say for example either plant creation or else WBS element or else company code. So if you have any master which is not covered as any of these models, then you will go for building a custom object to govern this master data. In that case, you have flexibility to choose whether you go ahead with the reuse mode or else you go with flex mode. But for the standard objects, it's already fixed and you cannot change it. For the custom object, it's up to you which mode you will use. Okay, so now
Akshay,
what? Go ahead, please.
is there any specific business case to build a finance object on flex mode, the rest of the data models on the use mode?
Yes. Okay, so we'll discuss that now.
Okay.
Fine. So, but otherwise, you understood the concepts, right? Both.
Yeah, we understood the concept, but why only the finance data model built on flex, but the rest of the
Yeah.
data models are built on the use? Just we are trying to understand.
Okay. So, if you look at all these objects versus your finance objects, right? So, always the finance object always associated with a time dependency. That means when you are creating a GL account, cost center, profit center, you will associate the validity period. But for other objects, it is not like this. There is no time dependency. It doesn't. You don't attach any timestamp for your other objects. But for finance objects, when I'm creating a cost center, I'll say what is the validity period of this cost center, till from when to when. Okay, so that is the unique nature of your finance objects. So now how your flex mode will helpful for this with this timestamp thing. Okay, so now what happens is, assume that you have a scenario. This is your MDG system, and you have target systems. Okay, so now what happens is I'm setting up a new plant in one of the in my organization. So that when I'm creating a plant, probably I'll be having some finance terms also associated with those plant, like what cost center and what profit center should be used for these plants. So the plant I'm going to set up in this particular for in a particular in this systems is, let's say for example, 1st November to and the validity period, it should be available from 1st November till 31st December. Okay, currently somewhere we are in mid of October. Okay, so now I wanted to create a GL account. I wanted to create a cost center, profit center. So likewise, multiple objects I wanted to create. So what I will do is, when I'm creating these objects, I'll also associate this timestamp for those objects, and the approval process and everything will happen now itself. But I'm not replicating this particular master data either here or to here or anywhere here. I will, after activation process also, I'll keep all these objects in my MDG staging area only. So when this particular 1st December approaches, on this particular 1st December date, then I will release. There is something called addition process in finance. We will discuss when we are talking about the finance. So there is something called addition process. So what happens is, this GL account, cost center, profit center, everything I'll create under this particular edition. And this particular validity I'll associate with this particular edition. So 1st November, the validity of this edition is 1st November to 31st December. 31st December. Okay. So what I will do is, I will automatically when it reaches to 1st November, this particular edition will release. Release in the sense all the objects under this edition will be replicated to the respective target systems. So it gives a flexibility to group all your finance elements under one parent, and you attach that validity period to that particular parent. And whenever you release that parent thing, depends on the validity, automatically all the underlying objects will be really made available during that time. Okay, so this is one reason where SAP introduced the finance. But in other cases, right? So what happens is, when you take the material or business partner, there is no such kind of validity. So once you, as and when you create, the material will be available in the target system. Depends on that when you wanted to use, you can use that material. But for this one, you cannot use this particular cost center, profit center, or any of these objects in the system before 1st November, because those objects are not available over there.
But these objects are available in MDG system, right?
Yeah, in MDG, if it is available, but that too in a staging area, right? So we are not going to create any transactional documents in MDG system.
Okay. It's sit in MDG system, but not replicated to the respective integration systems.
Yes, yes. In MDG also, that too in the staging area.
In the staging area with active data or inactive data?
Active data, active data.
Okay.
Okay, so this is one reason, and another reason is, so what happens is, for a particular cost center or profit center also, you can have multiple validity periods. That means there is one cost center CC1. Okay, so from 1st October to 1st November, you will be having some values. Let's say the description will be something XYZ. And for the same cost center, I'm going to add another validity period, 2nd November to 30th November. And the description is ABC. Okay, so this is for the same cost center, not a different one. Again, for the same cost center, someone is changing the description on this one, 1st December to 31st December. So then what happens is, here the description is, for example, 1, 2, 3. So if I'm creating any orders or anything where if I'm referring this particular cost center during this period, the description shows this one. And if you are using the same cost center during this period, the description will show this one. And this during this period, the description will be shown over here. So every value of those attribute also are associated with the time period for finance objects as well. So this entire information will be stored in your staging tables. Okay, so that's why SAP actually come up with this flex mode. Okay, for finance objects. In the out of box objects, only finance object follows this flex mode concept. Okay, because majorly the reason is because of the time period associated with the master data.
Sorry, Akshay. Like a flex data is actually a time-dependent one, and
no, it's not necessarily. So you might be having multiple reasons where you can create a flex mode or flex data. For finance object, this is the reason. But when it comes to some other things, right? See, ultimately the point is, you wanted to store your active records in your staging table after activation also for some time or for a long time also. Okay, so there could be
like how
multiple
can
reasons.
we identify whether it should be a flex data or reused? I mean, is there any setting or configuration or
Yeah,
how?
that we will when we are discussing about the data model,
Okay.
I'll show you that one. How to decide, how to design whether it's a flex or reuse thing.
Okay, depending upon our configuration only, it will be stored in that way, right? Like,
Yes, yes, that's true. That we will discuss today as part of the data model concepts. We'll be discussing that. Okay, but you understood that concept, right? So this is one use case. The other use case is, let's say for example, I'm creating some master data, but this particular master data I don't want in my the target systems. This is for my some reference purpose only. Okay, and based on this master data, I'm creating some other master data which I need it in for the transactional purposes. So in that case, what data that you are not required in your target systems, that you can limit to your staging area only. In that case also, you can go with the custom data models, flex data model. If something is not required in my target system, whether that is temporarily or permanently, then you can go for this flex mode. If something needs to be made available in my target system as soon as this data gets created, then you need to go for a reuse mode. But for material out of box objects, you cannot change this concept. This is already designed and it will work in that manner only. Okay, is this concept clear to everyone? Okay, so if you look at this particular diagram, this is an example for flex mode. In flex mode, this diagram actually they're given two databases in the staging area, but it's not like it's a single one only. This entire thing is a single one only. Okay, so later SAP corrected this in the recent pictures, but this is to somewhat older one. So where it shows that you have two databases in your MDG layer, but it's not true. It's only one single staging tables. There only you will have either active record or inactive record. But here what it says is the same record will be initially storing in your staging area, and after activation the same record will get stored as an active record in the staging area. Okay, so this we call it as a flex mode. Okay, and if at all you want this data to be made available in your underlying active area, so there is an explicit replication is required. Over here you can see explicit replication is required. Okay, whereas in case of reuse mode, after activation automatically this data will be moved to your underlying active area. You no need to configure any explicit replication. This is an out of box functionality. Okay, so if this is clear, then we can get into the system and start looking into the data model topic.
Akshay, just want to confirm one thing. In flex mode, the data will get into the tables in MDG only when the replication is initiated, right?
No, when that activation is initiated. Which table you are talking? Staging table, right? Or active area table?
No. Like, say for an example, we have say BKPF table or say cost center table, CSKS something.
Mm-hmm.
So, like when the data will gets updated into the CSKS table.
Okay, in the same system you are asking, right?
Yeah, in MDG, yeah.
Okay, so in that case you need an explicit replication here. You need to configure this explicit replication. So once you configure, what happens is after activation or probably when that edition or something that gets released, it automatically made available. It automatically gets replicated to your underlying CSCK, those tables.
Okay.
One more question, Akshay. Like
Yeah.
difference mainly with the flex and reuse is in reuse model, the data gets deleted. I mean, after the activation. In
Yes.
flex mode, it gets still stored in the staging area.
Yeah, that is true, but with a point that the record will get stored into the same staging table, but with a active indication, with the active indication.
Yes. Whether it's been activated or still in staging, that will be separation. Like how to
Yes.
differentiate between staging
There will
and
be a
active
flag
data.
actually for every record. There will be a flag. Okay,
Yes.
active. So if that flag is 0 means it's an inactive record, staging record. After activation, if the flag will automatically turn from 0 to 1, which indicates that it's an active record. This record got activated. But you rightly mentioned the same record gets stored into your staging table.
Yeah, in the sense the data won't get deleted actually.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, from the deletion point of view, it's still available from the flex mode.
Okay, thanks, Akshay.
Okay, fine. So let's get into this system. So as I said earlier, all the MDG configurations will be looking in MDG IMG. Once you get into MDG IMG, general settings, you have data model, edit data model. Okay, so in edit data model, so as I said, for out of box these master data, right? So already the data models are available. So we call this as the entire object. Your material master will be represented with something called data model. Okay, so for material master, SAP already provided the data model name is MM. For business partner, customer master, vendor master, the data model is BP. For finance objects, the data model is OG. For article master, the data model is AR. For EAM objects, the data model name is U1. So these are the data model names that SAP is already built. Okay, anything other than this one, if you are creating your own data model, okay, then it should start with Z star or Y star. Okay, and what this data model, basically this data model represents your entire material master object. Okay, so if you look at this, this is the material master object data model. Under this particular model, you have something called entities, attributes, relationships, and everything. You do all the configuration, all the attributes, everything that represents your MDG model. And finally, when you select this and activate it, that is the time in the backend, the staging area or staging tables will get generated. Similarly, for business partner, this one. For finance, OG. Article master and EAM objects are not available over here. That requires an additional business functions we need to activate. So that actually requires separate license and everything. Because that is not actually developed by SAP. It is SAP partnered with the other company, and it is their solution. Okay, other than this one, you also find this S-Flight data model as an example. Okay, after this, all the other data models that you see in this system, which starts with X or Y or Z, are the custom objects, custom models. Okay, so now let's look at what is this particular data model. Okay, so this is your ERP system and your MDG system. I'm taking example of material master, but whatever we are learning as part of MDG for one, if you are learning it for one object, the same concept applies for all the objects. There is nothing different, except in finance you have something called addition concept. Apart from that, rest everything same across all the objects, the concepts. Okay, so now in ERP, what are the tables that we have? If I take example of material master, the tables are Mara, Marcy, then MARM, MVKE. So likewise, you have multiple tables in your material master. Okay, so and each table has certain attributes, fields, table fields. Okay, so this is available already without MDG also in any SAP system. Now in MDG, what we do is, because I need to create equivalent to this one, I need to have a staging tables. Then only this data gets stored into my staging tables. So for every table, here you have something called entity. We call in MDG entity. Entity 1, entity 2, entity 3, entity 4. Under entity, you will have something called attributes. Attribute 1, attribute 2, attribute 3. Similarly, here also you have certain attributes. Okay, so now these are the different attributes. So what happens is, this corresponding to this Mara table in MDG, we create something called entity. And whatever the fields, table fields you have in a ERP layer, you have here, just give me a minute. So similar to table on MDG side, we will create something called entities. And under entity, you will actually represent these table fields with attributes over here. Likewise, like this. Okay, so this represents your Mara table of ERP. This represents your Marcy table, and along with our attributes, this represents another table. This represents another table. So that means in MDG side, you will have something called entity. Under entity, you will be having something called attributes. Okay. Now what happens is, this entity this entity, these attributes, everything represents one master data, some view of your master data. This represents your material basic data, this represents your plant data, another entity represents your sales data and valuation data. So something like this. Now, what we do is we group all these entities and attributes under one parent node that we call it as a data model. Okay, so that is what the for material master the data model is So under data model, you will have all the entities. Under entities, you will be having attributes. And when you have more than one entity in a one data model, so you need to make relationship between these ones. Relationships, just like how you have a join, right? When you, if you look at Mara and Marcy table, there is a relation between Mara and Marcy. The material number in Marcy table will go and look as a foreign key check in your Mara table. So there is a relation between parent-child relation. Mara Marcy, RS Mara MVKE, like that. So this is what this represents the data model. This data model represents one master data. Under data model, you will have entities, collection of entities. Under each entity, you will be having collection of attributes. And when you have more than one entity, there will be a relationship between both the entities. Now, once you do all this kind of design, and finally what you do is basically you activate this data model. There is something called activate. When you activate this data model, that is the time for, by taking these relationships, these entities and attributes, system will create the staging tables automatically. So those are generated staging tables, not created by any person. So always you don't directly create the staging tables in data model or in MDG. The staging tables, you do all your configuration under data model, and then once you activate your data model, your staging tables will get generated based on the entities, attributes, and the relationships. Okay. So now, any questions here? I'm just trying to compare the MDG data model with your ERP tables and the attributes. Okay. So if you look at this particular data model, so there will be something called your data model, and under data model you have multiple entities. Okay, under entity you have attributes. For every attribute, similarly how you assign a data elements to fields in a table, for attribute also you need to mention the data elements. And if you have more than one entity, you need to define a relationship between those entities. And finally you activate this data model. Okay, so now as part of this particular data model, we will be learning all these concepts, how to create it. Because if you take material master, this data model is already available the entities are also already available, the attributes, the data elements, the relationships, everything is already available. You are not creating anything new in a data model. The only scenario where you will actually touch this particular data model is if, as part of the business requirements, if you have some custom attributes, I wanted to add some custom attributes in my material master data, Mara level or plant level or at sales level, that is the time you enhance your the respective ECC tables. You also, corresponding to that one, you also need to enhance your data model. So we are not creating new. You will be, you can you have a flexibility to add your custom attributes as well. Just like how you are enhancing your standard tables, here also you have that flexibility to enhance, to add the custom attributes as well. So once you add all the custom attributes, and if there are new entities are there, and you define the relationships, and finally when you activate the data model, the delta changes will get adjusted in the backend staging tables. That means in material entity, if you add some custom attributes, and when you activate the data model in the material entity staging table, those custom attributes also will be available.
Okay. I mean, for any change, we have to again activate the data.
Yes. Yes, we have to activate. If you are touching the data model, like when you are adding any new attributes or when you are adding a new entities, then you need to activate the data model. Then only the changes will get reflected in your backend staging tables. Otherwise, in the staging table, you don't see those new attributes. If you don't activate, you cannot create any using MDGU applications. You cannot create any materials. It says that okay,
There is no syncing, right?
there were some changes are made to the data model. The post adjustments are probably that it's not done. Okay, so this is one use case how to extend that one, but I always strongly recommend that because for material master and all these objects, these models are already available, so we don't get an opportunity to create a right from scratch. When you are not creating anything new, then we will be losing so many concepts. I may not be able to explain on the data model, because that's why I always go with creating one custom data model right from the scratch. So that what happens is, in that scenario, we will be covering all the different entity types. We'll be discussing about the relationships. We will see all the challenges, all the structures that are getting generated, everything we will see. Okay, now once you know how to create a data model from scratch, then extending the standard data model is just like a simple thing. Okay, so now okay, so let's look at the standard data models, how it look like. So this is your material master data model, and as I said earlier, you have something called entities. When you select this particular data model, click on entities, you can see all these other different entities. Okay, so now there is an entity called corresponding to your Mara table. The entity name in MDG is material. So under material entity, if I go further down, I can see all the attributes under that particular material entity. So you have your authorization group. You will find whatever the attributes that you have in Mara table, most of the attributes you will find over here. So this is the hierarchy. Data model, under data model entity, under entity you have attribute, and this attribute will be associated with data element. And there is something called relationships. When you have more than one entity, you need to build a relationship. Otherwise, when you try to activate the data model, system will throw some error messages. You cannot activate. So majorly we will be discussing in the data model, so these concepts. Now also you can see the hierarchical view of your data model. So when you select your data model, go to visualize data model. Okay. So under data model, material is the parent entity. So under this particular entity, you will see all these attributes. Okay. So the other standard entities are also available. So wherever you find this folder structures, so these are nothing but entities. Under entity, you will be having the attributes. Okay, we'll come back to this one again. Okay, so now our next topic is how to create a data model. Okay, so for this one, what we do is, because already these are already available, we will take one use case, the simple use case which everyone understands, like the same concept, material and plant. So the business requirement is we wanted to create a product, and the product should be made available in multiple plants or multiple sales organizations. The same material concept. Okay, so how you have your Mara table. Under Mara table, you have Marcy plant table. So I create a material. At the material level, I'll enter all the basic information, all the required basic information. And at the plant level, I'll enter the plant specific information. So I should be able to extend, let's say I'm creating a product. Let's say the product is pump. Okay, so what is this pump is of type of finished product. Then the unit of measures is each. Then the description is a pump. So these are the basic attributes of your pump which gets stored in your Mara table level. But this pump I wanted to extend to multiple plants. So then your plant data will come into picture. So plant will be like 1000, Under 1000 plant, I'll maintain some attributes like ABC indicator or plant deletion status, some attributes. Similarly, the same pump I can also extend to another plant. So here also I'll have different ABC indicator and deletion status. So likewise different values. So this is our use case. So we need to represent this in a data model. Okay, so now when you are representing this one, it's a very simple. If you look at first, I need to create one data model. Let's say, for example, the data model is as always the data model. When you are creating your custom data model, it should start with Z or Y. Okay, and it should be always two digit. You get two character. You cannot enter more than two character. So I'll take example of, let's say, for example, Z5 is my data model, or ZP product, right? So I'll say ZP is my product data model. Under this particular data model, I'll create one entity. The entity name is Z product. Okay, and under this Z product, this is my entity. Under this particular entity, I'll create some attributes like product type, product group, unit of measure. So some attributes I'll maintain over here. Now this will represent only my product level attributes. Now to represent my product, this product has to be extended to multiple plants. I need one more entity, that is Z site or plant or something like that. Under this particular Z site, again I'll have plant specific attributes, ABC indicator. Then I will have some cross plant status. So likewise, I'll have a couple of attributes I'll take. So basically what we are doing is we are creating these two things I'm representing using this particular data model. So I'm creating a data model. Under the data model, I'm creating two entities. Under two entities, I'll create some attributes. Whether it's a flex or reuse and those things we will discuss further. Okay, so is this clear what we are going to achieve as part of this particular data model? Okay, fine. So now how to create a custom data model? The same configuration, you need to go to MDG IMG. Okay, so before that, let me show you how the staging tables also look like, how I can see the staging tables. Okay, for MM and BP, as I said earlier, is out of box and staging content, everything is available. Now we just saw the data model version of your master data, like in terms of data model, entities, attributes. But how it look like in the staging table point of view. Okay, so for that one, to see the staging tables, we will go to using this SC38. There is a program. Okay, I forgot the T code name. MDG underscore model or something. Let me look at that. But,
yeah, this one.
so no program name I remember, but there is a directory code also. So either you can navigate via T code, or you can. This is the program. USMD underscore data underscore model. Okay, so now here when you run this particular program, it asks for the data model. So let's provide standard data model material master data model, and execute. So when you execute this one, you can see here on the left hand side you see something called entity version. Corresponding to this entity, on the right hand side you will see the staging table name, the physical staging table name. Okay, so if you look at these names, the names are generated. So /1MD/MD something. So it is very difficult to remember. You can remember your active area tables like Mara, Marcy, those things. But the staging table names, you no need to remember. That's why SAP has provided this program where you can input your data model. It will show you your entities and corresponding staging table names. Okay, so now here, let's say, let me go to material. Okay, so okay, so this, assume that this is the staging table for my Mara table. Corresponding to Mara, this is my entity, and this is the corresponding staging table. So when you double click this one, it will take you to S11 only. This is S11 view only, where you will have your the field names over here. So this is a staging table. So if you look at the data, there will be some data also should be available in the staging tables, which is in process, not yet approved or in progress. Okay. So this is the data. Now you can see USMD active is the field which will tell you this will be available in every staging table. Automatically it gets added when you are generating your data model. This particular USMD underscore active is the field that will automatically get added to your all your staging tables. So there you have something called indicator 0. 0 means it's an inactive record. This is in progress. Someone it is not yet approved. This is in MDG staging area only. Once this record gets activated or approved, final approved, then this record will be deleted from here and it will move to the underlying ECC tables. But if it's a flex mode, the same record stays over here as is, but this 0 will turn into 1. So that is how you can identify whether it's an active record or inactive record. Okay, so that is, we will see, we will create our data model and we generate the staging tables, and then we can look at how it look like the staging tables. Okay, so now I'm here in the edit data model. Okay, so let me see if ZP is already available. Okay, ZP is already available, someone created. So ZX is not there. ZM is also not there. So let me create ZM. Okay, so you can click on new entry. So I wanted to create my own data model. Let me put ZM. This is equivalent to your material master only, ZM. Okay, so I'll say here the description. I'm giving the description to this particular data model, which represents like it represents my Q master. Anything, I'm just giving Q master or product master, material master, anything. Okay, so you can provide your data model name and SKU master or some description. Always remember it should be 2 character and always the first character should be ZXY. After that, second character can be anything, 1, 2, 3, ABC, anything you can keep. Okay, so now let's hit enter. Okay, after this you have something called active area. Let me save till here. I'm just capturing under this transport. Okay, fine. Now after this you have something called active area. Okay, so this active area decides whether you wanted to develop this data model using flex mode or reuse mode. Okay, so now let's look at the standard okay, I'll check this Okay, so if you look at this for there is something called active area mentioned. Similarly for BP also there is something called active area mentioned. For finance object which follows this flex data model, so there is no active area mentioned. So that means when if it is blank, or else if you see something called MDG, like MDG, it can be either blank or MDG. So if you see either of these two things, you can assume this is a reuse flex mode. Other than that blank or MDG, if you find some name over here, then this is a reuse mode. Okay, so what this particular active area contains. So what happens is basically if you look at this particular, it's a free text. Okay, SAP has provided this free text for your this, they named it as a material active area name. But the most important thing is, for corresponding to this active area name, you can see there is something called in the left hand side reuse active areas. So if you click corresponding to this active area, there is something called access class is associated technically. That means this particular access class will drive your complete reuse mode functionality. So if at all I have to say something, my custom data model or anything is a reuse mode, first I need to develop such kind of class over here. This kind of, I need to develop this access class, and that access class you name it something over here, and this you will associate with your data model. Okay, so here assume that I'm taking this class, of course, just for your reference. So what I will do is I'll go to active areas. Okay, so there is no active area for our data model. Click on new. I need to provide SKU ACT, SKU active. Okay, so okay, and mandatorily I need to provide some class. I'm not supposed to use the same material one because we don't have any new class. I'm just showing you how we will make it as a reuse mode. Okay, for time being I'm filling some class over here, and after that if you go back to your and now go to active area, need to save it. Okay, so if you look at, you see here, this is how I'm linking. That means what happens is at runtime, system will refer this active area and it will go to, it will look up that the class that you are associating with your active area. But for flex modes, there is no access class, there is no active area. Now, what is the significance of this access class or active area? Okay, so then feel free to stop me if you are not, if you have some doubts, okay. So this is my MDG system where I have my ERP. Okay, this is my MDG layer. Okay, my data model is ZM, and I'm linking this ZM to something called active area. That active area is associated with something called access class. This is MDG specific class. Okay, here in ERP, you have your database. Okay, you have your the active area tables. You also have your SPRO configurations. Okay, so now what happens is this particular, okay, let's talk about reuse, the concept that we understood for the reuse, right? When you, this is your staging table. So at the time of activation, as I said, the data will be pushed down to your underlying active area in case of reuse mode. How that is happening? So since we associated this access class, at the time of activation, this access class will read the data from your staging table, and this access class will push the data to your active area table. This is your save operation. Okay, now after that, assume that I created a material and that material got activated successfully and the material number stored over here in my active area, and the record got deleted from my staging table. Now I wanted to edit that material. I wanted to extend the material to some additional plants. In this case, what we do, in this case, what happens is when you search for the material and when you try to open that material, okay, then the same access class will read this particular, the data is not available in my staging area. It will read the data from your underlying active area only via this particular access class, and the data will be displayed on your UI application. And if you are trying to edit, the same record also will get inserted into your staging area. Okay, so the data gets stored into your staging area. So that means this access class is responsible for your save, read, okay, and also, as I said earlier, when you are creating a materials or anything, so your SPRO configuration, it will look into your SPRO configuration, it will run all the validations the same way how you are creating the materials using MM01. It in MDG also it will have the same way creation of your materials. Okay, so that all that thing is done by this access class. So this access class acts as a bridge between your MDG layer versus your ERP layer. It reads the data, it saves the data into your active area. So that's why access class has got a lot of importance in your reuse mode. Whereas in flex mode, you don't have this access class. The data will be created in the same system. It will get activated in the same system. I don't bother about this access class and everything. The data will be moved via explicit replication to this one. So there is no concept of access class in flex mode. So now, if at all you wanted to develop any object using reuse mode, okay, so in that case, you need to also create this kind of access classes. Okay, let's look at this access class, the material access class. So this is the class name. Okay, so there are a lot of methods are there here. It's a very big development. If at all you wanted to develop any object using reuse mode, it's a very big development. Okay, out of which there are some important methods are there. Okay, so there are some important methods are there. See, it will perform your authorization checks. It will also perform all the validations via your SPRO configuration. It will also derive your standard configurations. It is responsible to enqueue your master data. It will read the data. It will query the data, and it also saves the data. So all the CRUD operations, everything that will be done via this access class. So if at all you wanted to do debug something, you can put a breakpoint over here, and from the MDG UI, if I try to see, create, save, or read, so these methods only will get triggered in the backend. So all out of these are the bare minimum methods that you need to implement. If at all you wanted to create your own reuse mode, you need to, there is something first, you need to create a Z class. And for that Z class, if at all I have to say this Z class is my access class, you need to add this interface. And this interface brings those methods: your save, read, query, derive, check, authorization, enqueue. All those methods are part of your access class. So you need to code everything over there. So it's a big development, developing an object. So that's why SAP took so many years to build this material master BP. Okay, and then every year on year they enhance these access classes to add more functionalities. Okay, similarly, if you take example of business partner also, as I said, it is a reuse mode. So there also you will have something BP access master. When you select this, the active area is partner. It's a free text, you can provide meaningful name. What is important is the class that is associated with this particular active area. For this one, this is the access master. Okay, so this is a class type. And even if you open this access class also, you'll have the same methods: save, read, query, because every access class has to extend the same interface. This is a BP one. So in the BP also, you'll find this access interface, and you'll have the same methods: check, authority, enqueue, dequeue, derive. The logic will be different. This is for BP and that is for material master. Okay, query, read only, save, everything remains same. So any questions? Till now, is this clear how to make any data model as an reuse, or for now I'm deleting it, I don't want it to. Okay, so in our case we will go ahead with the flex mode. Okay, assume that there are some shortcuts are there. People, if someone is developing some custom data model, they want this particular data in that target systems, but some people will follow ideally the recommended approach is develop these access class and everything, but some people will follow some shortcut techniques to make the data available in the active area post the activation process. So those shortcuts we will discuss in the workflow. I'll tell you that how we can actually bypass this and do that one later. But conceptual wise, this is what makes the difference, whether it's a flex or reuse. Your active area makes the difference. Okay, so these are the properties that I'm inputting and maintaining at the data model level.
Actually, like, okay. The difference between flex and the reuse. Okay, sorry.
Okay, and you see here for some of the data models there is something called MDG mentioned. MDG also, either if it is blank or MDG is a standard keyword that SAP provided. In both the cases we consider this as a reuse mode, flex mode only. Okay, fine. So that is about the active area. Now we will keep it blank, or else you can actually maintain this one. Just give me a minute. Okay. Okay. So after that, there is something called prefix. So the purpose of this prefix is we will put some prefix z, zx, y, or something like that. Z, x, and some prefix. Okay, what does this prefix mean? So what happens is once you activate your data model in the backend, it generates all your staging tables will get generated. Okay, so in the staging tables also, if you look at the field names, attribute names, it has some prefix. So for all the structures or all the tables or all the field names, so it will just add this prefix. Okay, so what is the advantage that you get with this prefix? So it gives you it brings you the uniqueness for your attribute or structure. So maybe someone is creating another data model. If both are using the same entity name, I also added one entity and the other person also added one entity. So he will use his own prefix and I will use my own prefix. With that one, the structure that gets generated will bring you that the tables that get generated will bring you the uniqueness to your object. So this is just to separate it out from other generated objects versus your object. Okay, so you need to provide some prefix over here, any unique one. Okay, package is just like you can store all your packages in all your changes, because what happens is when you if I use this one, what happens is all my generated objects, the tables and everything gets stored under this particular package. Let's say just like normal how when you create a program or something or any class or functional module, you store under a package, right? So this is what the package. Okay, because the content will get generated automatically in the background, so we are providing all these inputs so that when system generates the content, it gets stored into this package and with this prefix name. When I add a field attribute name as material type, then system will add zxm/mtart, like it will generate that gives that prefix. Okay, after that you have something called who created, when it is got changed or something. Okay, now another important one you can see here, active version. So currently it says that none, but there are three statuses are there. So let's discuss about these statuses. Your data model status. Okay, So those one is none. So initially when you are first time when you are creating, the status shows it as none. Okay. After that, when you activate your data model, the status will change to same. Okay. And after once you activate it, later you wanted to add some more attributes. Then what you do, you go to that entity and you add some more attributes, and first you save your changes. So when you save your changes, again the status will be changed to different. This is just like you have your active version, inactive version, right? For any programs or anything, something like that, different. Now, after that, once you activate your data model, the status will be again set back to same. And again, if you do some changes, the status will be set to different. Again, after activation, the status will be set to same. So it will toggle between same and different. Like this is an active version and this is an inactive version. Okay, and this is new version. When you are creating a function module or a program table or anything, initially before activation or save, the status shows it as new. Once you activate, the status will be turned to active or same over here. So this is your MDG side story. I'm just trying to compare this with your ABAP program creations. That's it. Okay, since we are creating first time and we haven't activated till now, so that's why the status is none. Once I add all the entities, attributes, and I click on activate, that time the status will change from none to same. Same means there is no inactive version. It's the same, only one version. Different means there is one active version, one is inactive version. Okay, so any questions till now? We just created a data model. Under that, we still had to add entities, attributes, and everything. Sorry. Okay, so is this clear to everyone till now?
Yes, Akshay.
Okay, now let's save till here. So what this warning says is enter a value for active area. We wanted to create it as a reuse mode, right? So that's why I haven't entered. That's why it is giving a warning. It's not an error message. Even if you don't wanted to see this warning message, you can enter here MDG. You enter MDG, that is also still fine. When you try to save, you don't get that warning message. See? Okay. Now, after this, now our next activity is we need to add the entities over here. Okay. So first let's add one entity, this particular zprod entity and some attributes over here. So select your data model, go to entity types, click on new. So here, first I need to create an entity, and at the entity level also I need to enter some properties. I need to maintain certain properties, and after that I will add all the required attributes. Okay, so let's name our entity. Okay, so the entity name probably I'll give some Z, for example, Z is Q underscore mat. I'm just giving some any meaningful name. Okay, so now there is very important in the data model. Okay, so there is something very important in the data model, that is nothing but your storage and use type. Okay, so this storage and use type, you have one important property over here. There are different types of storage use types are there, 1 2 3 4. Okay, so what is this? These 1 2 3 4 types. Okay, so now if you look at in general, okay, in general, if you look at your material structure, how it will be, Mara table is there. Under Mara table you have Marcy, then again you have MVKE, and again you have MBEW, and under MARC you have MARD. Okay, so likewise you have the hierarchy. Okay, you have some hierarchy over here. Okay, so now whenever you create a material, what happens? First, the material information gets stored. Your material number gets generated over here in this table. So after that, the other information gets stored into the respective tables. So for this particular one, so we call this as a parent entity or parent table. The other ones are the childs. You cannot create any entry into Marcy table or in this one without Mara entry. So it has to flow from this particular approach only. So that's why we call this as a parent table. The others are child tables. In the same, in MDG also you have entities. Okay, so entity type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. 4 types are there. Okay, so type 1 entity we call, if at all I need to create this kind of parent, so that you can create using SU type 1, and the childs you will be representing with SU type 4. SU type 4. Okay, so now here if you look at this particular one, now this is my, it is equivalent to my Mara table, so I need to represent this as I need to mention this as my type 1, so that I will represent this as my parent table. So that's why I'm selecting it as a SU type 1. Okay, now if you look at this particular description for type 1, what happens is the description you can see changeable via change request generated database tables. Okay, so what is this change request? So we will discuss about the change request concept in the after UI topic in the process modeling. But since we some or other way will come across this concept change request in data model or in UI, so let's wait at very high level. Let's discuss about what is this change request concept, and we will get into more details later. Okay, so now what is change request? Okay, let's take for example in your let's say for example in your organization you are traveling from one place to another place. So what you do, you as an the employee will raise a travel request initially, and he'll open the travel form and he will input all the data required details, and he'll submit the request, travel request. So then what happens, system will generate some travel request unique number. Okay, so the number will be, let's say for example 10001. It will generate some unique number. Now what happens, once you submit this request, it will go to the manager for approval, and manager will open, this is employee, this is a manager. Okay, so manager, what he will do is he will actually open your request, the same request. He'll get an email and he'll open that request and he'll review the data. If required, he'll correct this data and he will approve or reject the request. Assume that manager approved this request. It goes to your finance department, and finance department will validate all your finance related stuff, and finally they'll approve that request. Finally it goes to your travel desk, and they will contact the employee for ticket booking, and once your ticket booking is done, and the request will be closed. So in this entire life cycle, what you are doing is we are tracking you the status of your request, either you are manager or finance or travel. They always talks in terms of your the travel request number. So this particular number is associated for this particular instance. Maybe if some other employee creates something else, then it will be generated new travel request number. The same concept in MDG also. Every change that happens in MDG, I mean for the master data, whether it's a new material creation or material change or material extension, that will be associated with a unique number. That number we call it as a change request number. So I'm creating a material now. System will assign one change request number. I'm creating, after that I'm editing, extending that material to some other plant. System will create another change request number. And I'm probably changing some properties. System will create again another change request number, one after other. Once the process is completed, maybe later point of time, if someone wants to extend, system again generates a new one. So likewise, for every change that you are doing, the system will assign a unique request number, that the lifespan of that request number is until that the decision is dead. Finally, once it get approved or rejected, the lifespan of that particular request will be there. So this is a change request concept in MDG at very high level. Is this clear to everyone? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Your entire MDG runs on this change request concept. Governance means I'm associating one unique number. Under that particular change request, I will do all the changes. Now, if you look at this particular description, you can change the entity that you are creating. That entity can be changed via change request. So that means if at all the attributes that you entered under this particular one, those attributes you wanted to change those values of those attributes, see, it can be possible only change via change request. Without change request, you cannot change anything. If you go to MM01 or MM02, I'll go to MM02 and I can enter the data, click the save button. There is nothing, no request or nothing. But in MDG, every change will be associated with the number. Who created this request, who approved it, when it is created, when it is approved, what values user changed under this particular request number. Everything will be captured. So if I open my material and look at, I can see all the history of how many requests got created for this material. And each request who created, what changed, and all those things will be there. Okay, we will discuss more in more details in process modeling, this change request concept. But just to make you understand this, the type 1, I'm saying that when you define some entity as a type 1, you can change the attributes of that particular entity using change request. And also system will generate a staging table for this one. Okay, so this is your storage use type. Now, data element. So validity, we will leave it now. We'll discuss it later. So I'm just covering here the important attributes which we use 90 to 95%. The attributes validity hierarchy, these things we don't use at all. So I don't want you to confuse in the first time itself with all these things. So I'm just highlighting whatever we need. Most importantly, I'm just covering over here. Okay, so that now data element. Okay, we discussed about like the data elements will be available provided at the attribute level, but why at entity level I need to provide this data element? That means what happens is in your type 1 entity, let's say for example, ours is ZM and the type 1 entity is ZQ underscore mat. This is my type 1 entity. Okay, of course, later I'll add all the attributes over here. Attribute 1, attribute 2, attribute 3, and for every attribute I'll associate the data elements. Okay, now here this particular entity also in the generated, once I activate the data model, system will generate a staging table for this one. In the generated staging table, there will be 4 attributes will be there in the generated staging table. Okay, so this is one attribute, this is one attribute, this is one attribute. The fourth one is your entity itself will add one of the key attribute. It acts as a key attribute in your generated table. That's why this is also part of my table. That's why I need to provide a data element here as well. So for type 1 entities, what happens is when you activate that one data model, in the generated staging table, your type 1 entity itself will become one of the key attribute in the generated staging table. That's why I need to provide a data element over here. So in the generated staging table, there will be 4 attributes.
Type 1 entity means action.
This one, type 1 entity means this is a type 1. We call it as a storage use type 1.
This type. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that's why I need to provide the data element over here. That is MATLAB. Okay. So then hierarchy, validity, these are not required. Coming back to this, something called key assignment. So this is also again another important attribute setting. Okay. So this key assignment is basically how your key behavior. There are 4 types out there. 4 types, 4 different behaviors. Okay, so now what happens is, let me show you on the UI first, then we'll come back to this.
Akshay, in this case, the key is the Matner, right?
Yes,
As per the data element.
yes, yes. I'll show you while creating a new material. Okay, so now when I'm creating a material, so this is the important one. This is my material key in the standard material master. Okay, so now let's look at these options. When you so this one you can see on this particular UI application, this basic data, this represents your type 1 entity in standard data model, all the attributes of your type 1 entity. Now here this material is a key. Now if you look at this key behavior, first option is what it says is key cannot be changed, no internal key assignment. That means here system automatically generated when you come when you actually open this UI, it automatically generated some key. Okay, so this is coming from your internal key assignment. But what this behavior says is, if at all you don't want it to assign an internal key, that means user has to explicitly enter that key. There won't be any key get generated. User has to enter a key over here. Okay, so that is one, and key cannot be changed. That means once I enter this particular key over here, let's say for example, and once I hit enter, this particular field will become read only, so I cannot change it. So basically here the requirement is, let's say business says that okay, the user has to enter the key, and once he enters the key, you are not supposed to change that one. You need to make it read only, disable that field. In that case, you need to select like this option: key cannot be changed, no internal key assignment. Okay, in the same way, if you look at this one, the other option is internal key assignment only. That means here this field will be always read only, so that user cannot enter that external number, and automatically it should always populate with some internal key from the number range. That is another behavior. So the third one is key can be changed, no internal key assignment. That means system here it will be blank initially when you open this one, but so and you enter some key. Okay, there is no internal key assignment, and once you enter this particular key, after enter also it should not get grayed out. Users should be able to still again change the value. Okay, so that is the third option. And fourth option is key can be changed, internal key is possible. This is what actually for Material Master SAP provided. That's why when you, let me show you, I'll close this again. If you try to come back, okay, see here what happens here. As per this one, key can be first internal key assignment possible, so system is assigning this internal key, and after that key can be changed. That means if I don't want this, I can replace this with my as per my requirement key. So that is a setting. So you can actually play around with these options, keys, how it should look like when you are creating your custom data model.
So even the approver can change the key in the later stages, Akshay?
Yes, user approver can also change if you use this option.
Okay.
Only this is applicable only for the creation scenario only. Once your metal got created and in the update scenario or change scenario, anyway, it is not applicable, this setting. This is applicable only for the creation scenarios. Okay. Fine. So in our case, what we will do is we will select the default option. Key cannot be changed, no internal key. That means system won't propose any internal key, and the user has to explicitly enter that key. And after that, once user hit enter button, automatically this field will be grayed out and no one will change that key. So you will see this behavior when we are developing the UI application. Based on this one, you are in the UI, the key field will get automatically adjusted. Okay, fine. So now, any questions on this key assignment? Clear? Okay. So after this, I'll come back to these things little later today itself. But after that, let's go move with other attributes. Set shell. For this particular material, if at all you wanted to assign any set shell, we can do it. So because you see here, there's a set shell. So this kind of set shells you can associate over here. You can assign over here for this particular attribute material. Okay, these are the short text, medium text, long text, what you wanted to display on the UI. Okay, and temporary keys. Okay, so this temporary key is nothing but, again, if you look at, let me open, let's try to create new. Okay, so what happens is this is the material number system proposed, and there is a dollar symbol before that. That indicates in MDG we have a temporary number, temporary key concept. Okay, so that what is the temporary key concept? So this is your MDG system. You have your ERP layer, and you have your MDG layer. So when user log into this system, okay, once you try to create a new material, system will assign some number internal from the internal key. So that is, let's say for example 123, and it adds some dollar. So this internal key got generated. There's the internal key object is available in MDG. It's not your ERP number range. It's your MDG number range only. From MDG material master number range. From this one, system will generate the next available number over here. Okay, so now when you activate, this is your active area, when you activate this particular material, then what happens is that time the system will actually, there is a material master number range object is already available in your ERP side. So system will this is temporarily, this we will refer this number temporarily within MDG, but at the time of activation, this number will be replaced with the actual number that got generated from your ECC or ERP specific number, and that number will be added over here, created, your material will be created with that number. So until within MDG, I need to assign some key. That is the reason MDG also comes up with some default number range object during the creation scenario to tell whether it is a MDG specific or the actual one. So we are adding that prefix over here, dollar symbol. When dollar symbol is there, that means it is a MDG internal number. And once activation, this MDG internal number will be replaced with the actual material number, and this material number will be used for further. That is why you can see here for every creation scenario, you will have this prefix will get added. And this number, the MDG number range object, is nothing but this one. You will have this number key, temporary number keys. So you need to create your number range object in SNROT code. That number range object you need to assign it over here. Okay, so let's look at material master. I go to entity types. Here the type 1 parent entity in data model is, name of that one is material. So see, this is my type 1 entity. Now when I double click this entity type, so this is the MDG specific number range. We call it as a temporary key. So on this particular UI, this 670 is the number that is got generated from this number range object, and it added that prefix. It added that particular prefix dollar. Okay. So if you have any number range objects, this kind of temporary number range requirement, you can make use of this configuration. Okay. Any questions?
No.
Clear? Okay, so that is about the number temporary key, but in our case we can just leave it because here I'm saying no internal key assignment, and that means I don't need any internal key. So user has to input external key. In that case, this will become optional. This is required only when you say internal key assignment is possible. Okay, so this is we can leave it blank. Now after that, there is something called active area. We also looked at this active area at the data model level and even at entity level also. At entity level also, you can create your own active areas and access classes. Okay, so if something is maintained at the entity level, that will take the precedence. Otherwise, it will take that the data model level one.
Okay. But actually, like if you give some conflicting ones like flexion data model and
You cannot do that one.
Okay.
So that's what.
Okay.
So if it is a flex, here also it should be a flex.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Now deletion is basically whether you wanted to in MDG are you giving a flexibility to delete this data or not. You can say deletion not allowed or deletion allowed these records. You can just leave it the default option. And this is the description of your entity. I'll say you master. Okay, and this structure table field, these are actually, it represents, gives the reference tables. Like as I said, on ECC side you have Mara Marci table, right? So if this is an informational one only, this entity is for which corresponding to which entity, or if it is a field to corresponding to which field, so those things you can actually maintain, but it technically doesn't have any significance. It's an informational purpose. Okay, so that is what it as a whole. It when you are trying to create a new entity, first thing is you need to input whether it is an type 1 or type 4. Of course there are type 2 3 are there. I'll come back to this later, but at this point I'm explaining only type 1, and type 4 is all your child entities. You can create it as a type 4. In our case, this skew mat material will become type 1, and the plant or site will become type 4, which is a child. We'll come back to this one. Okay, so we just created a type 1 entity, and for type 1 entity it is mandatory to maintain the data element because this entity will become one of the attribute in the generated table, and after that the key assignment, and then the description. If at all you have any internal number range assignments, you can make use of this one. If you wanted to use a different active area, you can make use of this one. That's it. At entity type 1 entity level. So I'm just saving this. Now the next activity is we need to go and add attributes. So I created a data model, created an entity. Now let's add the attributes under your type 1 entity. So for that one, click on new entry, take some attributes from your, I'll take from Mara table because all the data elements and everything is already available. So let's take MTART. Description. I'm just giving me attribute name, the corresponding data element. If at all you wanted to make this attribute as a mandatory attribute on the UI, you can select this one, required attribute. And if it refers to amount or quantity, then you need to mention the reference attribute. You can also attach a search help. This is just like when you are creating a table and when you are adding the table attributes, right? These are the common ones. Okay, so quantity or search help you wanted to assign, and the description of this one. The additional one you see whether it's a required or not, where you can decide whether it's a mandatory or not. And no existence is basically what happens is, in general, in SAP, where, let's say for example, there are material types out there. So all these are the possible material types. Now what happens, for example, if I enter something which is not available, any junk value, then system will throw me an error message, because it always validates your value table in the backend, and if the value is not available, it will throw an error message. It won't accept that value. Now I wanted to bypass that check. Then you can select this option, no existence check. So system will bypass that whether this value exists in the value table or not. And remember, this, though you select this setting, at the end of that activation process, this will be a temporary bypass at the requester level or approval level. But later you need to correct it. Otherwise, at the activation time, system doesn't look into this one. It will actually look in the value table. If it doesn't exist, it will fail your activation process. This is the provision that SAP provided temporarily, that you can actually maybe at the requester level, he don't know what material type he has to input. So he entered some random number. Then at the approver level, approver has to correct the data. So that is, otherwise if you don't give this flexibility, requester cannot submit his request. So that's why temporarily you can bypass this check, but ultimately at the final approver level, all these checks will be performed and it will fail. So the approver has to ensure he has to correct that data. So likewise, we can keep on adding multiple attributes. I'm just adding a couple of attributes: material type, then industry sector. Then I'm adding one more material group. These are enough. I hope you all are following me, right? You are with me. So that's
Yeah,
it.
actually.
I just created one data model under that one type, one parent entity, some attributes. Since you have only one data model, sorry, one entity, then no need to work on the relationships. Only when you add another entity, that is the time relationship will become mandatory. So let's, now I'll save till here. Now I can activate this data model with one entity, one parent entity. I can activate this data model. So what I'll do is I'll go back to this ZM data model. Now click on activation. Save is this, save is done. Okay, what is that? This is already saved, but it is this ZM slash MDG ING. Data model is ZM. Okay, so now the status shows it as none only because we haven't activated. Now let me activate. This is the button where you need to activate this data model. Select your data model, click on active. Now this is the time system will generate the staging tables in the backend. In the status bar also you can see here the generation progress. It will show you that text sometimes. You can check generated database structures, tables. it will take some time because it has to create the table and everything. Okay, so this is a transportable. You can move this transport to. We'll discuss about the business object after some time. Okay, so the data model. Let's look at the status. Now the status changed to same. That means from none to same. So this got activated successfully. Okay, so let's take this data model. Now go to that program and look at your staging table, how it look like. Okay, so this is your entity. Okay, and this is your staging table that got generated. Let's look at the staging table. Mandate is the one which automatically gets added whenever you create a new table in SAP. And this is your key field, the entity name. If you look at, this is the entity name. Your data model, ZM is your data model, and prefix it adds your data model and your entity name. And this is the data model data element that we maintained at the entity level. USMD active is the field added by MDG only by default to indicate whether it is an active record or inactive record. So this is also added by MDG only. So our three attributes are comes over here. Your MAKTL, your material group, industry sector, material type, but it adds your data model and some prefix over here. So this is the staging table that got generated and created by, changed by will be added automatically. All these things. Okay, now if I go to my type 1 entity or the data model and SU type 1 entity, if I add one more attribute and activate that, automatically your staging table will get added, adjusted with the new changes. Is this clear? Any questions? Okay, so yeah, feel free to let me know if you don't understand some of the concepts. We can discuss. Again, I can explain. So we just created one data model. We created one entity. We defined that entity as my parent entity or SU type 1 entity. And after that, I added some attributes under that entity. And finally, I activated the data model. So once one entity, one staging table got created. So now let's look at some more options in the type 1 entity. Okay, so this is my type 1 entity. So there is something called over here language dependent text. Okay, so this means if you look at a material master, in material master, there is a table called MAKT. MAKT. So which stores your material long descriptions in multiple languages. Okay, so this is the standard table. Material, then this is the language key and material description, and this is the description in the uppercase. Okay, so now this is on your ECC side or underlying ERP side. In MDG side also, if at all I wanted to maintain the material descriptions in multiple languages, so you can see here the descriptions you can maintain English and the description German and the description. So likewise you can maintain this multiple descriptions. So if at all you need this kind of functionality to maintain the any descriptions, any master data descriptions in multiple languages, you also need a staging table in the backend. In MDG area, you need a staging table which will store the information similar to this one. This is your ECC side of ERP side of table and active area table. On the MDG side also you need that kind of table, right? So that kind of, if at all, for that one, you don't need to create a new entity. All you need to do is you need to select this option. When you select this option and just maintain that the long description, short descriptions, This is a long, and this is medium description length. This is a short description length. Okay, and save it. So in the same entity, I'm adding this checkbox and the description. So that means for this particular entity, whatever the description that I'm maintaining, that I should be able to maintain in multiple languages with this long, medium, short text. That is what I just said. Okay. Now if I go back to my data model, ZM data model, if you scroll right, since we already did, okay, so status, it is a refresh issue. You need to go out, and again if you go to MDG IMG, general settings, data model, edit data model. So because we did some changes after activation, the status should be changed to different. That is what I wanted to show you. So this is my ZM. Scroll right, see this status. Earlier it was same after activation. Now the status changed different. That means it's a inactive. There is an inactive version. Your inactive version and active version are not matching. That's why it gives a different. In the inactive version, you added the checkbox. In the active version, that is not added. Now what you need to do, you need to again activate your data model. So this time what happens is your MDG framework will look into your entity settings, and because we selected that language dependent checkbox, so system will generate one additional staging table which will store the multiple language descriptions in multiple languages. If at all you need that functionality, you can enable it. That's why in the original one I didn't add that one, because it's an optional thing. Now what is the impact if you add that select checkbox? That is what we are I'm discussing over here. Okay, so now this got activated successfully. The status changed to same. Now look at the staging tables. Okay, see, there is a text table. Okay, so this is a text table. This is the new one that got generated. This is already generated, and this is a text table also got generated additionally when we select the checkbox. Okay, so if you look at the table name, mandate, your language key, material number. This is the key, whether it is active or inactive. Okay, now you can see here short description, medium description, and long descriptions. This gives a flexibility to maintain your material descriptions in multiple languages. This is what exactly done for your material master data data model also. The data model also, let me open. Okay, execute. Look at your material entity. So this is the text table. This is your entity name. Entity is material entity. This is the text table. Type is text table. This is the table name. You can see here also you have your language, material, and the descriptions. I selected three checkboxes, long, medium. That's why there are three fields are there in our case. But here in data model, they selected only medium description. That's why you see only one attribute is available. Okay, so that is one. Now, similarly, if you look at this entity, okay, so there is something called attachments also there. So when you select these attachments, system will add some more two or three additional staging tables, and those staging tables will be used to store your attachments. Basically, when you are creating your material, so if at all you wanted to associate some documents along with your material, then this SAP has provided this kind of flexibility where you can add that attachments. But now what happens is with the latest releases, SAP come up with something called DMS, Document Management Services. So that is exclusively to store your documents associated with your master data. So now actually these two are, this is not being used at all. This was given originally, but this is not being used. And for the attachment, so the DMS functionality is used across MDG or SAP everywhere. So, but just for your knowledge purpose, when you are creating your data model, if you select this checkbox and activate, then you can see some more additional staging tables, which will store your document information, document type, and the content of the document in raw format. So those things you will see additional staging tables, but this is not required for us. And similarly, this sets, this is basically with respect to BC sets. So system will again generate one more additional table to store your BC sets. But these, I never actually saw any requirement where we need to activate all those things. See, first of all, custom data model creation itself very rare. Okay, it's not like people mostly use the existing standard data models. In very few cases, you see people will be creating custom data models. Okay, now anyway, for the standard material masters, we don't touch this. Whatever is available, we just use it, but we don't touch any of these settings. But what is the impact? What is the purpose of this checkbox? For your knowledge purpose, if you select this checkbox and save it and again activate, system will generate some additional staging tables. So I'll show you that how that additional staging tables, I did it for other custom data model, that is YP. Ours is ZM, right? ZM data model, but for YP, I just activated it. Now you can see here, there is a text table. There is a the main type 1 staging table. So these two, you can find these two are attachments. When you activate the select the checkbox for the attachment, so these two staging tables will get generated automatically. And here you will have the document type, your file type, file size, title of the file, those information. And the other staging table will store your the content of the document in a raw format. Okay, so that is about type 1 entity. So if any questions on this, so for data model, we discussed about the type 1, and we also discussed about how to add the attributes under type 1.
Akshay, one question here. So
Yep.
for DMS, do we need to activate any additional settings, or it's already activated?
It's already, it will be available in MDG.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll show you when we're talking about the UI modeling. There in the UI, you will see some sections where you can add the attachments and everything. That is out of box thing. But for this is for the standard data models. For the custom data models, if you have any attachment requirement, then even the MDG UIs comes up with adding that attachments and everything. So that's why I said this attachment checkbox is not actually useful for us. Okay, so I'll show you that. Okay, let me open this. In the top, you will have something called attachments thing in the UI application. So every UI will have this by default. So no need to add at the data model level. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, Akshay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Fine. So now let's move on. Now what we need to do is we need to create another this one, another another child plant. For the plant, we need to create an entity. Okay. So for the plant, so what we have done so far, we created ZM is a data model. Under that, we created Z skew underscore mat, which is my SU type 1, storage use type 1. Okay. Now under this, we added MTRT. We also added MB or SH. We added one more MAKTL, MAKTL. So these attributes. Now this is my parent entity. Now I need to create a child entity. Always the child entity will represent with Z. For example, the name of the entity is site, and here I'll represent my child entity using SU type 4. Okay, so now let's create a type 4 entity. So in the same, I'm just going to create a new entity. So here I will provide the name Z site. Okay, this is, I wanted to create it as a my child entity, so that's why I'm selecting it as a type 4. Now in this particular type 4, if you look at this description, changeable via other entity. So see, generated database table is common across your type 1 and type 4. But what is the difference between that? In case of type 1, it says that via change request, the other one is via other entity type. So this other entity means basically you always can change the attributes of your this plant extension in the context of your parent. Without parent, you cannot change this particular data. That's why here this data can be changeable via other entity type. That other entity type is your parent entity type. Okay, I cannot directly go and open this plant data for this material and edit it. So your system will create a change request. That change request will be locked from your plant, from your material. It will lock your material object. Under this particular material object, it will lock your plant, and your user can change the data. So that means this data always gets changed in the context of this particular material. That's why we call this as you can see the description as always via other entity type. Via other entity type. Okay, changeable via other entity type. Other entity means, of course, here also it requires a change request, but the change request will be created at your parent level, and under that particular parent, you can change all the other childs also. So CR is mandatory for your parent entity. For the other ones, also indirectly CR is mandatory, because here we are saying these changes are happening in the context of my parent entity. The parent entity has that CR. That is what, and generated the staging table will get generated for this particular entity as well. Okay, so now this validity data element is not required for this one. So if you, even though if you enter this data element over here, because in for type 4, this attribute, this entity won't become an attribute in the generated staging tables. That is only for your type 1s only. Only when you are creating type 1, you need to enter your data element. For type 4s, this should be blank. Even though if you enter some data element here and try to save, system will throw an error message. So your key also not applicable for your type 4s. Whatever value you set over here, it will ignore this, because keys and everything we already set at my parent level. At type 4 level, all I need to say, this is my storage use type 4, and after that this language dependent text attachments, all these are applicable for your type 1s only at the parent level, not at the child level. Though the UI, in the UI you see these values, this is a common UI that comes across all your 4 type 4s, but these values are not applicable for your type 4. Search help is also not applicable. Okay, temporary key is also not applicable. All these we set it only at your parent level. The only thing that is applicable is your active area. You can have separate dedicated active area for your type 4. Okay, so if something is maintained here, this will take precedence. If nothing is maintained over here, your data model level active area will be given preference. Deletion is also applicable whether this entity data you are allowed to delete or not. Description, we can say plant data. Okay, this structure or for the reference, let's say you can say this reference table is MARC tilde, you can ignore it. So that's it. Not much information when you are creating your type 4. Just select it as a type 4 and then the description. That's it. Active area if you have any requirement. But usually we don't keep active areas at entity level. We will have one single active area that is at the data model level. But the provision is given, but most we don't use at all this entity level active areas. So for type 4, you just give only this information. Now, all you need to do is you need to go back to your attributes. Okay, click on new and add some attributes. I'll go to Marcy table and I'll take some attributes, existing attributes. I am not maintaining any key information. See, at the attributes level, you will say all the non-key attributes only. Then what about the keys and those things? We will discuss once we maintain these attributes. I'm maintaining this MMSTA, grant specific status. Just entering these attributes, this indicator. Just maintaining only 2 attributes over here. If required, we can add more.
Don't we need a plant, Akshay?
Yeah, that's what I'll come back to that one. Okay. So as of now, I'm just adding only the non-key fields. Okay. Now, when you try to save here, system will show you 2 error messages. Okay. So these 2 error messages are, if you remember, when you are adding one more entity in your data model, you need to create a relationship. System will, for sure, it will expect relationships. Currently, I haven't created any relationships. We just created a type 4 and we added attributes, but there is no relation because these 2 are not independent. If you look at this one, these 2 are not independent. This site has a dependency with this entity. Okay, so that means what happens, let me tell you in terms of Mara, Marcy. Mara you have and Marcy is the table. Okay, so now here what is the key field in Mara? Matner is the key field. This is a key field. In general, in Marcy, what is the key field? Matner and works. These are the key fields. After this, you have other non-key fields, ABC indicator, some explant status, something like this. These are non-key fields. Now, what is the relation between these two? The material number that you are entering in plant, I mean the plant that you are extending here in the for this particular material, right? So that means the key here will become a key over here. Okay, so now in my plant, this is my, it represents my SU type 4 and this is my SU type 1. Okay, now I need in my generated staging table, I need 2 keys. First, one key is from material, I need this material key. How I get that key over here in my type 4? You need to make a relation between these 2 things. The name, there are 3 type of relationships are there: leading, qualifying, referencing. So these are the 3 relationships that you have. Now, always between parent and child. This is my parent, this is my child. The relationship is leading relationship. What happens is, now I created a type 4, and if I make a leading relation between my type 1 and type 4, and once I activate my data model in the generated staging table, because of this leading relationship, the key from my parent attribute, parent table will automatically get added as a key in my plant level attribute, plant level table. This will automatically happen. I no need to go and add a specifically a key in my type 4. If as soon as system sees this relationship, automatically in the generated staging table, it will add this key. So with this one, I can avoid one error message. I hope it's clear. So you can see here, leading is inconsistent. That means you have one type 1, you have one type 4, and there is system expects a leading relation between type 1 and type 4, but you haven't maintained. You cannot have a child without a parent. So there you need to make a relation between parent and child, between type 1 and type 4. That is what it is expecting. Okay, so the relationship, okay, you can, let's save it. That's fine. Now let's maintain one relationship. So I'll go to, you can see here, relationships tab, node. Okay, so click on new entry. Always in case of leading, it will be something like this. SU type 1 leading, SU type 4. That means on the left hand side, it should be the bigger one, parent. On the left right hand side, it should be the smaller one. Okay, so that is what I'm going to maintain now. Here from entity type, what is that entity over? ZQ underscore matter. Valid name. Let me just look at underscore not underscore. What is this name? See, this data model and everything is a pure technical activity. Extending the data model or creating the data model, it is not a functional thing. Okay. Okay. So Q underscore mat. Maintain this one only, right? Q underscore mat only. So it is a invalid.
I think you need to give entity like other two fields also maybe actually.
Let me, maybe if it is not refreshed, let me come back and try. That's fine. So let's put the other entity. We'll save it, then we'll see. Okay, so this is my type 1, this is my type 4. Why? Okay, let's enter some, you need to give the, you need to name this relationship. So I'll say, let's say for example, Z Q underscore site, some any free text, you need to just name it. Okay, that's fine. So one, I need to enter my type 1, type 4, and the relationship name, any free text, and it should be, the type should be leading relationship, leading. Okay, leading relationship. And cardinality. Cardinality is 1 is to n. 1 is to n means for one material you can extend it to n number of plants. So that for one type 1 you can have multiple type 4s. Multiple type 4 means like one material to n number of plants. So in that case, you need to mention the cardinality. If it is a 1:1, you also have option to 1:1 as well. S means it's a 1:1. Otherwise, 1:n. Data element and all these things are not required. Okay. So now, because when one type 1 is there, one type 4 is there, so I maintained one relationship, leading relation. Save it. So that error gone. Leading relationship related error gone. Now it is giving another, still the second error is there, qualifying error. Okay, so is everyone understood, right? Is it clear that leading relationship concept? Is this clear to everyone? Okay. Yeah, fine. Now there is something called qualifying relationship. So this qualifying relationship, basically what happens is, we got this key material as in the generated table. System will add this key because of we already maintained the leading relationship. Still, I need plant in my generated staging table as a key. So this particular key you will get via qualifying relationship. What does that mean, qualifying relationship? So let me tell you something here. This is my ERP. This is my MDG. Okay. So here, what happens is, let's say, for example, I have a material M1. Okay. So this material I'm extending to plant 1000. Okay. So now, whether this particular plant, if you look at this plant, is an existing master data, it should be available in my ERP. In my ERP level, you should create all these plants. So like you have the T00, T001W is your plant master, 01 or 1W plant master. So via SPRO configuration, you create all the required plants, 1000, 2000, 3000, 4000. So you create all these plants. So here on UI, in MDG UI, when you do an F4, its system will show all these valid plants over here on the F4. So whatever the value that user is inputting over here, okay, whether it's 1000 or 2000, the plant, I'm extending this material to these plants, right? It will go and validate against these values on your underlying ECC. I cannot enter a new plant over here, XYZ, which doesn't exist in my underlying ERP table. That means this is your plant master. Okay, so this is your complete plant master list. Okay, so whatever the plant that you are extending in MDG for a particular material, it has to qualify in this with your underlying value table. Okay, so now this, how I can bring this particular thing onto my MDG. That's where I create something called SU type 3. SU type 3 is which actually represents your underlying ECC, any some master data, reference master data. Okay, so that reference master data, I don't create in MDG again. I will use whatever the data is already available, the value table or the plant table. I will represent that plant table via SU type 3. Okay, and this SU type 3, I will make a qualifying relationship. Okay, so this particular, okay, so this will be represented with SU type 3, and when I'm extending, this is my SU type 4. So whatever the data as part of that SU type 4 I'm entering, it has to qualify with this particular SU type 3. Qualify means this SU type 3 represents this particular table. So that means I need to create a type 3 and I need to make a qualifying relation with my type 3. So one I maintained via leading relation, one I am maintaining via qualifying relation with the type 3. So when you make a qualifying relation, what happens is, because of the leading relationship, your material will come and sit as a key attribute in your staging table, plant type for staging table. Because of this qualifying relation, your plant will come and create it as a what is it, key field in your type for staging table. That is why actually system is expecting that qualifying relationship also here. This is your type 4 entity, but you are not maintaining any qualifying relationship with this type 4 entity. So first I need to create a type 3 which will represent my plant master, and I need to make a qualifying relationship. Okay, so let's see how I will create a type 3 entity. Let me save this till here. Okay, so go back to your entity types, new entity. I'll say Z site underscore MST or MST master, something like this. Now you can always represent type 3. So now look at this description, not changeable via MDG. So this represents my plant master. I'm not changing the master data, reference master data. I'm not changing the plant configurations or anything. I'm using that plant while extending my material. So that's why we call it as a reference master data. So you cannot change your type 3 data because it is just represents the data sitting over here in your ERP. You are not changing, okay, 1,000 plant for this one, you have some attributes that if at all you wanted to change this plant configuration, you need to go to SPRO and change it. In MDG, I'm using this 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 plant data. So that's where actually for type 3, the date not changeable via MDG. So you cannot change that in MDG. All you can do is you can use the data in your MDG. Examples are plants, material types. Material type, when you are creating a material type also, you will do some settings. So those you cannot change it. You can just use that material type while creating your master data. Similarly, unit of measures, your currencies or your country or whatever the material groups, all the SPRO configuration, you can use it in MDG, but you cannot change those properties. Okay, so that's why it says that not changeable via MDG and no generated tables. The generated tables will get generated only for the data which you are changing in MDG. Your type 1 data and type 4 data, plant data, parent data, child data. So those data only system will generate a staging table because it has to store the data into your staging tables. But for type 3, right, I'm using this type 3 as a reference thing. So I don't need a staging table to store. Only when you try to change the data, that your changes will get stored into your staging table. But in this case, it is a kind of read-only entity. Okay, so that's why no generated staging tables. Now your staging tables will get generated for type 1 and for type 4. No staging table get generated for type 3. We will see type 2 later. I don't want you to confuse you, but type 1, 3, 4 are very, very important. Type 2, even if you don't know anything about type 2 also, absolutely fine. Because you can use this type 3 as a replacement for type 2. We'll see it later. Okay, but type 1, type 4 and type 3 you should understand. Okay, so here I wanted to create a plant master. I wanted to represent that one, so that's why I created a type 3. And for type 3 you need to provide the data element over here. Okay, so I need to provide the data element because this data element, whatever works underscore D I am maintained, right? So it refers your underlying the value table T00, T001W. This is how I am linking my ERP table with the type 3. Because I am adding this data element, the data element are already associated with the value table via domain. So this is how I am representing my type 3. Okay, that's it. No other settings are allowed except you can maintain the description. Site master. Okay, so that's it. For type 3s, you need to select it as a type 3. Mandatorily, you need to provide data element. If you don't provide the data element, when you try to save or activate, you get an error message and the description. That's it. Remaining all settings are not applicable. All the settings are applicable only for your type 1. Okay, and for type 1s, type 3s, you are not supposed to enter any attributes. This itself is an attribute. It itself represents a plant master. There are no other attributes under this one. So only for type 1 and type 4 only you will have the attributes where your user will maintain and the data gets stored into a staging. For type 3s, these attributes are meaningless. This itself will become as a key field in your generated staging table for your type 4. Okay, so I created a type 3. Save it. Still qualifying relationship error, you will get it because we are not maintained. Now what I'll do is I'll copy this particular entity name. I'll go to the relationships. Now maintain the relationship. Always on the left hand side, bigger one. So your type 3 plant master is a bigger one which contains all the list of plants, out of which I will be extending material to some plants. So this type 4 will be on the right hand side. Now you can name it something like this. G is plant master site underscore MSDR, something like this. Okay, and the type relationship name is qualifying, and it will be always 1:n relationship for type qualifying relationships. Now hit enter, save it. There is no error. See, there is no error. So when you are creating a type 1, there is no relationships. System didn't ask for any relationship. By the time when you add a type 4, system expects these two relationships. One is leading, one is qualifying. So those relationships we need to maintain over here. So I'll go back to my data model, ZM data model, save, activate. This time what happens? See, at the type 4 entity level, we added only the non-key fields only. Both the key fields are flowing from, one is from your SU type 1 via leading relationship, another key field, plant key field flowing from your type 3 to type 4 via qualifying relationship. So in the generated staging table, you will see the non-key fields plus the key fields that got added because of the relationships. Okay, so now this data model got activated. Now go and look at the staging table. C38, open this program, run this program, provide the data model, ZM, execute. See, there is a staging table that got created. Okay, so these are for your type 1s. Okay, now look at this, try to understand this table. This is your parent, this is your child. That's why it says included entity type. This is your parent and this is the child. Here this parent itself, that's why it is blank. Now here this is your physical staging table name. Look at the staging table name. So your material got added as a key field, plant got added as a key field, active, and these are the generic fields, and we added non-key fields, ABC indicator and plant specific status. Okay, so this is your type 4 staging table. The same way, even in data model also, SAP created in the same way. So, okay. Is this clear, confusion, or simple, complex?
Akshay, can you please explain active area concept again?
Okay, sure. So see, this is your in general any SAP system, ERP system. Okay, so you have the database table set of SAP tables like your Mara, Marcy, the tables, right? So when you add MDG component, system will generate a staging tables because you need a place. Okay, what happens? This is your, we call it as a staging data, staging tables. This we call it as a active area tables. This is your MDG layer. Okay, so what happens is in earlier when you are creating a material using MM01, so once you hit the save button, the data gets stored into this one. But in MDG, user will log in and he will enter the data, he'll submit the request. Then we have this approval process, right? So this data will actually get loaded into your staging tables. On the staging, that is a inactive, because until all the people completes their review and finally approves that request, we will consider that as an inactive record. You cannot use that record for your transactional purposes, because that record can get rejected at any point of time at the final stage also. So until that final approval or final activation process gets initiated, the record will be there in your staging area only. So this we call it as an inactive record. Okay. Now what happens at the final approver reviews the data and he finally says, okay, that is the time this data will be moved from your inactive or staging table to your active area. This is an automatic process. Inactive record, that means 0 will turn into active record 1. And that one will be pushed to your, that record will be pushed to your active area. And that record will get deleted from your inactive one, staging area. This process, we also call it as a reuse mode. There are some other cases, what happens, the same process, user will log in, he will enter the data and he'll submit the request. It went for the approval process, and in the approval, final approver approved that request. So other scenario is, instead of pushing the data to your active area, the same inactive record will turn into active and it will be there still in your staging area only. So your active area also gets stored into your staging area. Now, when this data will be moved to my underlying ECC or the target systems, when I run an explicit replication. Okay, so this concept we call it as a flex mode, flex concept. Is this clear?
Okay. But like when you in the entity type, when you say when the data is flex or reuse, so I mean I didn't get the use of this active area, like with what is the use of mentioning with the
Okay,
there?
active area. Okay, at the data model level, we'll mention that active area, right? So what happens that active area? So how that, see, this is my now my MDG system. I have active area concept over here. We call it as an active area. This is associated with something called access class, ABAP, technically ABAP class. Okay, so you have your staging record, staging table, you have your active area table. Now, as I said, once this record gets activated in a reuse mode, this record automatically moves to underlying one. How that is happening? That is happening via this access class. This access class is linked to active area, and this active area at the data model level will be mentioning. That means this particular class will get executed at runtime, and it will read the data from your staging record, and it will move the record to active area or underlying tables. It won't automatically move, right? There should be some ABAP program or some logic which will read the data and move it to your underlying one. So that logic is part of your access class. And this access class I'm linking to active area. This active area I'm linking it to my data model.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Okay, so that's why we don't need active area for the flex. Flex.
Exactly. Because in Flex, what happens, the data, same data gets activated in the same tables, right? I don't need to push it down. For even for the pushing down also, that is an explicit replication DRF I need to configure, not via access class.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Great. So let me pause here.
Thank you for attending the session. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also feel free to ask your questions in the comment section below, and we will reply to them at the earliest.